Okay, peeps. Now on to chapter 3 of Cracker, the Best Dog in Vietnam. Chapter 2 is fairly short. And now we know in chapter 2, Willie ran out of school and came back home just in time to see the officer picking Cracker up. Willie had decided to give Cracker to the Army to go to Vietnam to become a war dog. Um, but now we're going to find out about Cracker's background, this little bit of the exposition of the story. Um, okay, so here we go. Chapter 3. Cracker had started out life as a big deal. She was born the daughter of a champion, Felix Olympius von Braun, who a lot of people thought was one of the finest German shepherds ever bred. Olympius had won 47 Best of Show titles before his owners decided to retire him. Cracker's mother, champion Midnight Moon of Shreveport, won 17 Best of Shows, even beating Olympius one time. Cracker's name as a puppy was not Cracker, but Magnificent Dawn of Venus. Venus was expected to be a champion herself. For a lot of people thought she was the finest in her litter. She was purchased for $1,500 by Willie's uncle on Willie's father's side and lived a pampered but lonely life in a big kennel with a big dog run. She won Best Puppy in match 3 times, even beating out her litter mates. But one day, her left hind leg got caught on a piece of chain link in her day kennel and the bone broke in two. After healing, she could still walk fine, but her leg bent in a certain way that made it impossible for her to ever be a great show dog. Willie's uncle decided to give her to Willie as a birthday present. She was 6 months old. Willie named her Firecracker, and when he got her home, she immediately proceeded to figure out how to open the refrigerator, eating every piece of meat in there until her stomach was so swollen she couldn't move. His parents had worried that she might need to go to the veterinarian and have the food surgically removed from her stomach. But Willie had just hauled her onto his bed and let her spread out while he squished himself up against the wall. When she woke up, he was sleeping with his arms around her. At first she growled, but then she realized she liked the feeling. Despite the attention that had been showered on her previously, she'd never quite felt loved in this way before. And so she began a life of being pampered in a different way. Willie worshipped her. Oh, he taught her a lot of stuff and made her behave sometimes. But she knew she had the upper hand. She was born to be a beloved queen and to eat good snacks. So, why was she now trapped in a crate in the back of a van? Why were there 2 other dogs who looked like her also trapped in crates in the back of the van? She howled. The howling reverberated in her ears and seemed to fill the whole world. The other dogs seemed scared, but they didn't howl. Cracker concentrated on Willie as she howled. Maybe he didn't understand the seriousness of the situation. Where was he? It was getting dark already. It was time for their walk. She was so lost in her howling that she didn't have the slightest idea how much time had elapsed by the time the truck stopped. The 2 men carried out the other dogs one at a time. She breathed deeply and howled even louder. As soon as the 2 men returned, she stopped howling and tensed her body. Beautiful animal, said one of the men. If you like dogs, said the other. He looked at her. Dog, you're going to Vietnam. They got dog diseases there I can't even pronounce. He turned to the other man. She'll be lucky to make it home in one piece. Actually, they keep the dogs there until they die, the other man said. They never come home. No kidding? My dad had a Doberman who served in World War II. He came back. He was the family dog after the war. They changed the policy with this war. The military considers the dogs equipment. and equipment is expendable. Cracker growled as they neared the crate. They picked it up, and she threw herself against the side of the crate and felt gratified when one of the men almost lost his balance. But it didn't stop the men from loading her into a big, dark room full of stifling air. She smelled more dogs and heard a couple of them howling. The room jerked, a whistle blew, and then the room jerked again and started moving. She couldn't see anything except a dark wall. This all went on so long that she fell asleep, dreaming of biting the man who had taken her from Willie. When she woke up, the train had stopped. A voice from the loudspeaker boomed, "Lackland Air Force Base, ladies and gentlemen." But all she could see was the wall. Two men picked up her crate and took her to a place that was almost like the place Willie's father had taken her a couple of times. A man put a new leather contraption around her snout so she couldn't open her mouth. And then another man poked and prodded her. So maybe she was at a similar place as before, and Willie's father might come get her before long. The man tried to grab her neck, but she whined, whirled around, and threw herself as hard as she could against him. She heard his head clunk and felt satisfied. Then another man came and grabbed the chain around her neck and held her down while the first man stuck her with a needle. After that, the days were filled with odd activities. Men would make loud noises around her and study her reaction. A big whirling mechanical thing someone called a chopper landed nearby. Again, men poked and prodded her. One man examined the leg she'd broken by pressing his fingers into it. Then one day a woman came along and stuck her with yet another needle. The woman had kind eyes. "You passed all the tests, Cracker. We need to tattoo your ear, baby. Go to sleep, sweetheart. Sleepy time." And that was the last thing Cracker remembered until she woke up in another big, dark, rumbling room, just like the previous big, dark, rumbling room. For some reason, her right ear hurt, as if it were scratched. That made her start up a new howl. And what she heard in reply surprised her. There must have been 20 other dogs, all howling and whimpering. They kept it up as long as they could, and then they all slept. She usually didn't care for other dogs, but she already felt a sense of kinship with these. What was happening to them? The room stopped again. She stayed still to concentrate on the commotion behind her, and then two new men were carrying her crate out of the room and to the back of a truck. She knew what a truck was. She'd ridden in trucks with Willie when they went camping a couple of times. The air outside was warm, humid, and fresh, and the pain in her ear had subsided a little. Another dog looked at her, which annoyed her, so she snarled and threw herself against the side of the cage. He whimpered. Annoying coward. She met eyes with yet another dog, one even bigger than her. He didn't annoy her. They looked at each other, and she felt a mutual respect. She pushed her nose to the gate of her crate, and he did the same in his crate. When the truck stopped, several men in uniforms crowded around the back, talking with the drivers. The uniforms were the same as the one worn by the man who took her from Willie. "A couple of them are real beauties," the driver said. "That one's big for a female. How much does she weigh?" The driver looked at a clipboard. 110. Moderately aggressive. Just what the Army's looking for. She had a broken leg, but they're keeping her anyway. Never heard of that. A couple of men lifted down her crate, and she lunged at the side. These men weren't thrown off balance, though. "She seems more than moderately aggressive," said the driver. "Gorgeous animal, though. From Chicago. Name's Cracker." At the sound of her name, Cracker's ears perked up, but nobody said anything more to her. From the truck, she smelled grass and lots of different people. The dogs' crates were carried to a nearby kennel area. One by one, the dogs were taken out of the crates and put into a kennel. Only Cracker waited in her crate. Finally, a man appeared with padding on his arms, and he and another man pulled Cracker out of her crate and tried to push her into a kennel. She slammed her body into the padded man and heard that wonderful clunk noise as his head hit the concrete. She heard one of his legs rise as he fell. She saw one of his legs rise as he fell. A third man appeared from somewhere and reached for the back of her neck. She figured whatever he wanted to do was bad, so she heaved her side into him, and he ended up grabbing her around the stomach. They wrestled and wrestled. "Throw her in the kennel," somebody yelled. She bit the third man's arm. Ah! Ah! Crazy dog! Suddenly, the man let go of her, and the three men rushed into her kennel and slammed the door. Cracker looked at them, and they looked at her. Even she knew this was all wrong. Oh well. She trotted off, but stopped when she saw another man wrapped in padding. "You're supposed to grab them by the back of the neck," shouted one of the men in the kennel. But the man moved toward her. She easily galloped away. She kept running until she came to a long building. She turned around and saw what was now 6 men closing in on her, breathing hard. For a while, she ran in a big circle as she listened to the men losing their breath. She heard one of them trip. Ordinarily, this might have been fun, but there was nowhere to go. And there was no Willie to go to. This wasn't fun at all. So she ran back to the only place she knew of where she might belong, the kennel. The gate was open, and she slipped in. It took the men a couple of minutes to reach the gate and slam it shut. They looked at her. She looked at them. Then nothing happened. She turned her head both ways and saw the kennels with dogs stretched into the distance on both sides of her. 2 kennels down was the dog she thought was okay. They met eyes. He looked a little scared, but a little happy too, to see her. The dog to her right was half the size of her. She wagged her tail eagerly. Cracker went to sniff noses with her, and then Cracker waved her tail in approval. A roof protected one section of her kennel from the sun, and a bowl of water sat in a corner. She lapped eagerly at the water. The dog to the left of her whined and pawed at her kennel. She growled at the dog, and it slunk back. Some dogs she just didn't like. The men still watched Cracker as she lay down, and then they left, and she waited and waited and waited, occasionally chewing on the steel gate or licking her raw spot. She felt crazy in this kennel, but at the same time, she knew there was nowhere else to go. She tried to feel exactly where Willie was. She knew the direction, and she knew he was far, but that was it. She whined and laid her head back on her paws. But the more she waited, the sadder she felt. And then the sadder she felt, the angrier she felt at everybody who came by. Whenever someone tried to take her out, she growled with such menace that they left her and took out another dog instead. She bit a fellow who brought her food in just because he annoyed her. She felt furious with everybody, even the people who just walked in front of her cage. The dog on her right, the one that everyone called Tristy, had guys petting her and taking her out all the time. Everyone liked Tristy, even Cracker. Sometimes Tristy would slap a paw up on the fencing between them, and Cracker would slap a paw in the same place, and they would run up and down their kennels at the same time. Other times when Tristy was away, Cracker would lie sullenly at the back of her kennel. One day, 2 men in uniform stood in front of her cage. She snarled and jumped over and over at the gate. She hated them, whoever they were. "This one's not going to make it. She's too mean. They're going to have to put her down, or maybe make her into a sentry dog. $5 says she makes it." And they shook hands.